Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Deku become Ultra Instinct Part 3. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like this video and also share this video with your friends. I have created my other videos playlist, there you can watch my all videos easily, check out as well. Let's start this video. There was 1 week left until Izuku started his journey to the UA high school. He couldn't help but feel Twitter about the whole thing since it was a new experience. As he sat on his bed, he thought about what his first day would be like, who would be in his class, who his teacher was going to be, and so on and so forth. Deciding that it wasn't healthy for him to be thinking about it so much, he put on his hoodie and sweatpants with the intention of going for a jog. He slipped on his trusty red shoes and exited his room. He saw his mom on the couch half asleep, watching her stories. Izuku cleared his throat to try and get her attention. With her eyes half lidded, she sat up and turned around to see what her son needed. "Hey mom, would it be alright if I went for a quick jog? At this hour?" Inko asked as she yawned. "Yeah, I'm kind of nervous about school, and I just wanted to try and clear my head." As much as she didn't like the idea, she knew that realistically she didn't have much to worry about. Musatafu was essentially a hero hub, so crime was fairly low, and if he did run into trouble, more than likely there would be a pro hero there to help him. Then to top it off, her son had a powerful quirk, so if he needed to, he would be able to adequately defend himself. Reluctantly she said, "Fine, but don't be too long." "I won't, I should be no more than 30 minutes. Izuku replied. "That's fine, I'll be up waiting for you." Izuku nodded and went out the door. Once he hit the street he broke into a light jog. His green hair bounced with each step he took, and after jogging for a little bit, a sheen of sweat covered his face. It was dark, light only coming from the lampposts he passed and the occasional car that passed by him. He was taking his normal route, and soon he would pass the alleyways he always did. He was so focused that he failed to notice that someone had bumped into him. What caught his attention was the squeak the individual let out as they ran into his leg. Izuku turned to see who bumped into him, and it was a little girl with silver hair and red eyes. One feature that Izuku found unique was the horn on top of her head. However, what he couldn't take his attention away from was the bandages that were wrapped around her arms and legs. How did she get these? Izuku wondered. She continued to sit on the ground, and Izuku figured that she was still shaken up. He bent down to try and pick her up, but she started trying to resist his efforts. Her eyes were wide, and it was obvious to Izuku that she was frightened. He lowered his voice in an attempt to be soothing and told her, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you. I just want to try and help you up." The little girl sensed the genuineness of Izuku's words and as a result let him help her up. "I'm sorry about Eri, my niece can be a real handful sometimes. Come on Eri, let's leave this gentleman alone," a voice called out. Izuku looked up to find the source of the voice. In front of him stood a man who wore a pink changsan, and on it had kanji which translated into "kill you." He had small beady eyes, a thin mustache, and black hair that was tied into a ponytail. Upon hearing the man's voice, Eri rushed into Izuku's arms and buried her head in his chest. Izuku tried prompting her to go to her uncle. "Come on Eri, you heard your uncle, you have to Please don't go," Eri said in a harsh whisper. She looked like she was on the verge of crying, and her body started to tremble violently. Immediately, Izuku knew something was wrong. With the way she's acting, I'm sure that she's getting abused. He knew that look in her eyes all too well. "She seems kind of scared," Izuku said. He was trying to prompt the man into giving him information that would confirm his suspicion. "She probably knows that she is going to receive punishment when we get home. Her father is a strict man, and he has no tolerance for her bad behavior. Isn't that right, Eri?" Izuku felt Eri grip his hoodie harder as the man asked the question. He didn't miss the threatening tone it was delivered with. Where did all those bandages come from? If she needs that many, the injury must be pretty serious. Has she received any medical attention for them? The man growled at the questions Izuku bombarded him with. "You're a nosy brat, aren't you? If you must know, Eri loves to play, but she's not very careful when she does. That's the reason why for all the bandages, and yes, she has received medical attention. Now could you please let my niece go?" Eri reluctantly tried to separate herself from Izuku, but he pulled her closer to him. Izuku saw right through the ruse and refused to let the little girl go towards the man. He wasn't sure whether it was the man in front of him or Eri's father that caused her injuries, but he was certain of one thing, and that was, home wasn't a safe place for her to be. The man saw that Izuku wasn't going to let go of Eri anytime soon and started to snarl in anger. However, the snarl eventually morphed into a chuckle of sorts. "You're one annoying kid. Since you won't hand the child over to me, I'll just take her from your rotting corpse. I wish I could say that I hoped it wouldn't come down to this, but I would be lying. I'm going to enjoy every second of this." The man took out a capsule and pushed it, and as a result a sword appeared in his hand. Izuku pushed Eri behind him as the man rushed him with the intention of decapitating the green-haired teen. Using 5% full cowling, Izuku was able to react fast enough and grab his wrist before the man cleaved his head off. Izuku started to apply pressure, forcing the man to drop his sword. The man growled and used his free hand to jab his index and middle finger into the arm Izuku was holding him with. Izuku felt his arm go numb and the grip he had on the man slipped. He tried to move his arm, but it just dangled uselessly as the man backed up. He had a smirk on his face, one that showed that in his mind, victory was assured. How? Izuku questioned. Well, since you're about to die at the hands of mercenary Tao, I'll go ahead and oblige you. My quirk pressure paralysis allows me to paralyze a part of your body based on the pressure point I hit. Since I hit a pressure point in your arm, I'm sure you can figure out as to why you can't move it. Izuku roared as he threw another punch at Tao, but the mercenary parried the punch and paralyzed his remaining arm. Both limbs hung by his side, and now he was unable to defend himself. I could kill you right now, but I promised myself that I would enjoy this. Ending it right now would be a waste. For right now, I'll just beat you to the point where you'll wish you were dead. Izuku's head started to snap left, right, up, and down as he was brutalized by the flurry of punches mercenary Tao was throwing. Blood was flung about as his head twisted in different directions. Some got in his eyes, which obscured his vision. He felt his face start to swell up as the hard knuckles of the mercenary kept striking him. Eventually getting bored, Tao grabbed Izuku and delivered a gruesome knee to his stomach. Izuku started to feel nauseous after the blow landed, but he couldn't use his arms to try and hold his stomach. Mercenary Tao followed up the knee with a vicious elbow to the back of Izuku's neck, causing him to crumple to the ground. Tao firmly planted his foot on the center of Izuku's back and grasped one of his arms. As the mercenary grabbed Izuku's arm, Izuku realized that he was able to feel it again. The voice of Tao then rang out as Izuku came to that realization. About 2 minutes have passed, which means you'll be able to feel this. In one fluid motion, Tao pulled his arm, and a sickening crack followed. Izuku howled in pain as he knew right then and there his arm was broken. Despite the immense pain, only one thought ran through Izuku's head. I have to protect Eri. With tears and blood blurring his vision, he turned his head to see if Eri was still there. Sure enough, she was, sobbing at the sight that was before her. Izuku knew this wasn't a battle that he could win, but he was sure that he could buy enough time for her to escape. Eri, run, Izuku shouted. His voice snapped her out of her tear-filled stupor, and instinctively she started to run as fast as her little legs could carry her. Oh no you don't, brat. Tao barked. He grabbed another capsule from his pocket and pushed it. A grenade appeared from the puff of smoke. Taking his foot off of Izuku, Tao positioned himself to where he would be able to hit Eri and pulled the pin. He cocked his arm back and threw the grenade, not caring if he had to bring her back to her father in more than one piece. Time seemed to slow down for Izuku as he saw the grenade rapidly approaching Eri. Without thinking, he activated 20% full cowling and rushed towards her and wrapped her in his arms, using his back to shield her from the imminent explosion. He ran forwards to try and create some space between them and the grenade, however the force of the explosion propelled him from the alleyway and onto the street. Shards of shrapnel were buried inside Izuku's back, but the adrenaline made him disregard it. Eri, are you alright? Izuku worriedly asked. She groaned in response, which made Izuku breathe a sigh of relief. He scanned her body, and besides a few minor cuts and scratches here and there, she was fine. The hoodie Izuku wore was in rags, so he ripped it off and threw it to the ground. From the alleyway emerged mercenary Tao with a calm and collected look on his face. Izuku gritted his teeth at the sight of the man, unable to prevent his anger from boiling over. You bastard. You could have killed her. It wouldn't have been the first time I killed a child. Besides, even if I did, it wouldn't have mattered anyway. The boss can just fix her. Tao said in a nonchalant tone. You're a monster. I won't let you take Eri. She's just a little girl, she doesn't deserve any of this. Tao sneered. How admirable, but both you and I know that you're on your last leg. Keep struggling though, it'll just make the kill all the more satisfying. He's right, I am on my last leg. I didn't want to use Ultra Instinct earlier because I didn't know how strong he was. Now that I have no more options, I might as well use it. It's a gamble though, because if I don't finish him off, I'll be vulnerable due to the stamina drain. But at this point, it's a risk I'm willing to take. Izuku closed his eyes and focused. Don't think, just let your body react. Ah, so you're accepting your fate, I see. To be honest, I'm kind of disappointed. I would have preferred for you to struggle a bit longer, but I guess it wouldn't hurt to end it right now. Tao said. He then rushed Izuku, index and middle finger pointed, with the intent of striking a pressure point in his head. He drew back his arm and thrusted it forwards, grinning wildly at the thought of adding another kill to his list. However, instead of striking flesh and bone like he expected, he whiffed and stumbled forwards. As he was trying to figure out what had happened, a fist met the back of his head, causing him to skid across the street. Slowly he picked himself up, and on his hands and knees, he turned around to look at his opponent. His speed has improved drastically. Is this just some second wind or is it something else? Tao didn't want to reveal his worry, so he put on a mask of bravado. That was just a lucky blow, don't let it go to your head. Just because you changed eye colors doesn't mean you can beat me. Offering no response, Izuku ran forward and delivered another powerful punch to Tao's jaw. Tao stumbled backwards and tried to recover, but Izuku was already there. His eyes almost had a primal look to them, and for the first time in Tao's life, he felt fear. Just what the hell is this kid? I was just faster than him moments ago, but now he greatly outclasses me in speed. I have to create some distance between us, otherwise I'm a goner. Tao retreated back into the alley they were in prior, and Izuku followed him with a cold look on his face. As the two opponents retreated back into the alley, Eri sat on the sidewalk inflicted. Izuku had told her to run, and now she had the opportunity to. However, she couldn't bear the thought of leaving the person who had protected her. She had seen the injuries he sustained, and she knew that he wasn't in any condition to fight. What should I do? What should I do? She frantically thought. As Izuku entered the alley, there was no sight of Tao anywhere. Izuku kept walking around until he heard a shuffling noise. Tao leapt from the wall, his sword raised above his head, with the intention of splitting Izuku in two. His sword clanked upon hitting the ground, and Tao's frustration started to bubble over. Stop dodging, and fight like a man, you cow. His sentence was cut short by a hook to the jaw, which caused him to careen into the wall. Tao's eyes were bloodshot as a result of his frustration and the intense pain. Before he knew it, Izuku was in front of him preparing another strike. Tao narrowly dodged it, and his eyes bulged as he saw the boy punch a hole through the wall. Fighting him is no use. My best bet is to get out of here. Tao tried to flee from the alleyway, but to his horror he found that Izuku was already there, blocking the exit. As Izuku stepped towards him, Tao slowly stepped back. He was outclassed, and continuing to try and fight him would have been suicide. It was unknown to Izuku that Tao had one more trick up his sleeve. I hate that he pushed me far enough to use this technique. But there's no possible way that he'll be able to withstand this. Please don't kill me. I've seen the errors of ways, and I promise to change. I never chose this life, you know. It all started when Tao on his knees cried crocodile tears as he blubbered about how he never wanted to be a mercenary and that he only did it to satisfy his material needs. He started to cry even harder as he saw that his sob story wasn't working in the slightest. Izuku was still approaching him with the same cold look he had earlier. Izuku eventually stood over Tao, his azure eyes piercing the darkness that surrounded him. Tao firmly clasped his hands together as he begged and pleaded for Izuku not to kill him. To his surprise, Izuku hadn't attacked him yet. A sly smile crept onto his face. Did the fool really buy it? It was getting kind of dicey earlier, but I knew my technique would work. All I have to do is. Tao's thought was cut off by Izuku's fist caving in his face. The green-haired teen used the momentum from the punch to slam Tao's head into the pavement. Tao seized for a little bit before finally going still. A pool of red started to form around his head. Izuku's eyes flashed, indicating that his quirk would deactivate soon. He walked out of the alleyway and found Eri in the same spot she was earlier. Although she was still scared, she perked up seeing that her protector had emerged the victor. Izuku slowly trotted to her as the silver colors in his eyes dissipated. He heard a voice ask him if he was alright, but he couldn't place who it came from. The vibrant green eyes he went into the fight with were now dull and lifeless. He felt tired and just wanted to go to sleep, but one thought was motivating him to keep on moving. I have to make sure Eri is alright. Slowly but surely he made his way to the little girl. He was a couple of feet away until he stopped. His eyes closed and his body went slack, causing him to fall face first into the ground. A mixture of eerie screams and the voice he heard prior were the last things he remembered before everything went black. The first thing that hit Izuku when he woke up was the sterile smell of his surroundings. Next was the soft beeping of the machine next to him. Izuku looked at the IV that was in his arm and he eventually started to put everything together. I'm in the hospital. How did I end up here though? Then it all came to him at once. He remembered his encounter with Eri, the brutal beating he took from mercenary Tao, and him using Ultra Instinct to end the fight. However, he was unaware of where Eri was and also was unaware about the welfare of Tao. While he was certainly angry at the man, Izuku had no intention to use lethal force in the fight. After seeing the pool of red form around the mercenary's head, he thought the worst. What if he's dead? It would be because of me, and not being able to control my anger during the fight. He looked around the room to see if Eri or anyone he knew was there. His eyes fell upon a man who was sitting asleep in one of the chairs. Upon inspecting the man, what Izuku initially noticed was that he had no nose. The second thing that caught Izuku's eye was the police uniform the man was wearing. As Izuku tried to figure out just who the guy was, the police officer started to stir awake. The man gave a massive yawn before looking over to Izuku, who was staring intensely at him. The police officer blinked twice in surprise before breaking out into a huge grin. "You're finally awake. I'm not gonna lie, earlier when I found you, you had me worried." Izuku continued to stare at the man in confusion. The police officer scratched the back of his head sheepishly as he realized he hadn't introduced himself yet. "I apologize, kid, my name is Officer Krillin, but you can just call me Krillin. I found you after you had your run-in with Mercenary Tao. You were in awful condition when I did, but because of your resilience it looks like you'll be able to make a solid recovery." Izuku then realized that the voice that had called out to him after his fight with Tao belonged to the police officer he was now speaking with. The thought of the fight made him remember the urgent question he had earlier. "Where's Eri?" Izuku asked. "Oh, she's with your mother. After a bit of coaxing from both your mother and I, Eri agreed to go down with her to the cafeteria to get some snacks." "My mom is here." "Yeah, she arrived here when you were in the middle of surgery. I'll tell you what, you're extraordinarily lucky that you didn't end up paralyzed. The shrapnel just missed severing your spine." "Is Tao still alive?" Krillin seemed to flinch at the question. Izuku noticed the hesitation and asked him again. "Is Tao still alive?" Krillin didn't want to tell the kid the status of Tao. While the mercenary was still alive, he was hanging on by a thread. From what Krillin had heard, he had suffered an open fracture on the back of his skull and a depressed fracture on the front. The man seemed to have also lost a lot of his cognitive ability as well. If the man didn't die from the brain damage he sustained, going forward he would definitely be a shell of his former self. However, Krillin knew that the team deserved to know, so after taking a deep breath Krillin told him, "Look kid, I'm going to be honest with you. Mercenary Tao is not dead, but he is extremely close to it. Ever since we arrived at the hospital, he has been in critical condition." Izuku felt queasy upon receiving the news. While Tao wasn't necessarily dead, he was sickened to find out that the mercenary was knocking on death's door because of him. Izuku didn't regret having to fight Tao. Had this situation occurred again, he would have done the same exact thing. What Izuku regretted was the consequences his fight with Tao had produced. For a hero, a victory consisted of making sure the public was safe and making sure no casualties occurred while doing so. After hearing the news, Izuku had doubts that he met both requirements. Krillin saw the remorseful look Izuku had on his face. Wanting to help ease the boy's conscience, Krillin told him, "Kid, don't feel guilty about what happened. Knowing Tao, he probably forced you into defending yourself. His injuries are a result of his own foolishness. You did nothing wrong. Irangi was so angry and I couldn't control myself. It's my fault that he's critically injured," Izuku said. "You had every right to be angry. If we're being frank, the man is scum incarnate. The amount of homicides he's tied to surpasses that of the hero killer. However, what makes him truly sickening is who he has killed. From pro-heroes to children, many have fallen by the hands of him. I understand that he's a horrible man, but is it fair for someone to die, even if they have the capability of changing?" Krillin gave the boy a small smile. He could tell that the kid had a pure heart, but he also saw how naive the boy was. "I can tell from your question, you want to be a hero, right?" "Yes, it's been my dream for a long time. From my observation of you so far, I have no doubts that you're cut out to be one. But that naivety is going to hurt you in the long run." "What do you mean?" Izuku asked. "Kid, tell me how those shards of shrapnel became embedded in your back." "Well, Tao threw a grenade at Eri, and I rushed over to where she was to shield her from the blast. He didn't seem bothered with the idea of killing her. And you're telling me a man like that will change?" Izuku froze. As much as he tried to envision it, he couldn't imagine Tao turning over a new leaf. The nonchalant tone he had when he told Izuku he had killed children before hadn't left his mind. "Listen, I understand where you're coming from. When I first became a police officer, I shared a similar viewpoint. However, as the years passed by, I saw many horrific things that altered the original stance I had. Criminals will do everything they can to get what they want, whether it's through deceit or physical harm. In my profession, you have to assume the worst, otherwise yourself and others can get hurt or worse." Krillin looked away before he softly muttered, "I personally learned that lesson 5 years ago." Izuku noticed Krillin's change in demeanor and gave him a consoling look. Krillin caught himself drifting off in thought and resumed speaking. "Sorry about that, kid, I just trailed off for a bit. You're right in saying that everyone has the capability to change, but what you need to realize is that everyone won't be willing to. Whether a police officer or pro-hero, the main agenda is to first, ensure the safety of the public and second, neutralize the threat. If one can neutralize the threat by simply incapacitating the individual, of course that option should be taken. But sometimes there will be criminals that refuse to stay down. If it comes down to their life and the lives of innocent civilians, I'm sure you know which takes priority, correct? Izuku slowly nodded his head in response. You have to understand that sometimes lethal force is justified. Even the symbol of peace, at times, has had to kill so that civilians could be saved. Izuku adopted a look of shock, hearing Krillin's words. Izuku had always portrayed All Might as someone who never would resort to such a thing, but would rather find another way. The fact that even the number one hero had been forced to take lives made Izuku realize just how high stakes the life of a hero was. Kid, I know you did not go into that fight with the intention of killing Tao. If he doesn't pull through, it won't be because you're a cold-blooded murderer. It'll be because you did what needed to be done. I understand what you're feeling, because I went through this as well, but try and find the silver lining of the situation. He's now incapable of hurting others and splitting apart families. While his status isn't ideal, you should hold your head high with the knowledge that others don't have to worry about facing the same fate his victims did. Although Izuku understood what Krillin meant, it didn't make it any easier for him to accept it. Krillin noticed that Izuku was still conflicted and gave a small sigh. I know he feels guilty about what happened, but if he wants to become a great hero, he needs to know the price he has to pay for the safety of others. A knock on the door drew the attention of both Krillin and Izuku. The man wearing a tan trench coat with a hat to match it entered the room. He also wore a green tie and black slacks to complete the look. Well, if it isn't Detective Tsukauchi, Krillin exclaimed. Officer Krillin. Tsukauchi greeted as he tipped his hat. I guess you're here to question Midoriya, right? If so, I'll go ahead and leave the room then. There'll be no need for that. It'll be fine for you to stay. Krillin, having stood up earlier, sat back down in his seat as Detective Tsukauchi got ready to question Izuku. Now Midoriya, I just have a few questions for you, this shouldn't be too long. First, I want to ask you, how did you encounter Tao in the first place? Izuku took a small breath before speaking. I was on a jog, but I stopped after Eri ran into me. As I was trying to help her up, that's when I saw Tao. Thank you, next question. Initially, upon seeing you, what did he do? At first he just insisted that I hand Eri over to him. He also told me that she was his niece. Eri seemed scared of Tao, but it was the mention of her father that absolutely mortified her. I saw how terrified she was and came to the conclusion that home wasn't a safe place for her to be. I didn't let her go, and because of that Tao attacked me. Tsukauchi processed the information he was receiving. The girl must be important then. To risk arising suspicion like that confirms it. Obviously, she's not important to Tao or her supposed father in a familial sense, if her fear of them is any indicator. The question remains then, just what makes this girl so special? Could you tell me how the fight went down? Initially, Tao was beating me up pretty badly. His quirk allowed him to paralyze my arms and made me unable to defend myself. After he broke my arm, I saw that Eri was still there. I told her to run, and she did. To prevent her from escaping, Tao threw a grenade at her. Luckily, I was able to get her out of the way in time and take the brunt of the explosion. I asked him how he was fine with the idea of killing her, and he told me that his boss could just fix her. After that he tried to finish me off, but fortunately my quirk allowed me to defeat him. The boss could just fix her. Had Midoriya been slower, the injuries Eri would have sustained would have been 100% fatal. As far as I'm aware, there are only 2 individuals who possess a quirk with healing properties of that magnitude. The first currently being in remission due to his bout with All Might, and the second, wait, there's a thought. Well, I believe that's all the questions I have for you. Midoriya, I wish you a fast recovery. Before Tsukauchi left the room, Izuku asked a detective, will I get in trouble for using my quirk in public? Of course not, since you used your quirk out of self-defense. You don't have to worry about being prosecuted or anything of that nature. It also helps that there were no cameras around to record the fight. Had footage of the encounter leaked, the situation would have ended up a lot messier, because to many it would have looked like the intent of you fighting Tao was to save that little girl. While that would have been an honorable use of your quirk, it still would have fallen under vigilantism, which is illegal. Izuku slumped in relief after hearing the news. If you don't have any more questions, I'll be on my way. Detective Tsukauchi said. Before he left he remembered something else he needed to tell the team. It almost slipped my mind, but Midoriya, your encounter with Tao is confidential information, which means you can't tell anyone. Is that understood? Yes sir, it is. Izuku replied. Excellent, well I bid you good night Midoriya. But that the detective left the room. Not long after they departed, his mom came through the door, and her eyes widened seeing that her son was awake. My baby boy, Inko exclaimed. Eri also saw that Izuku was awake and rushed to his bed to greet him with a hug. "Izuku," she cried. Both females ran towards the bedside of Izuku and wrapped him in a firm hug. Izuku hissed in pain as the pressure from the contact made him uncomfortable. Krillin saw the anguish on Izuku's face and reminded both ladies that Izuku was still recovering. Inko knew that he was right and she reluctantly released Izuku from her embrace. Eri, on the other hand, still had her hands around Izuku's neck with her face buried into his chest. "Come on Eri, you have to let Izuku go. He needs his rest," Inko said. Eri looked up at Inko with a sad expression in her eyes. Her bottom lip started to tremble. But I want to be with Izuku." Before Inko could respond, Izuku told her, "Mom, I don't mind if Eri wants to cuddle with me. I'm not that hurt." Between what her son had told her and the puppy eyes Eri was giving her, Inko caved in. "Fine, but don't be too rough, okay Eri?" Eri nodded before burying her head back into Izuku's chest. Izuku took his remaining good arm and wrapped it around the little girl. He gave her a warm smile as he hugged her back. He knew that she had gone through a lot, and this was his way of telling her that from now on she would be protected. Inko gushed at the sight, and Krillin couldn't help but smirk. "Looks like she's taken a liking to him, eh?" Krillin remarked. "Yes, she has. I'm just worried she'll grow too attached to him, and she'll end up being aloof to the family that decides to adopt her." Inko responded. "That was actually something I wanted to ask you about. How would you and Izuku feel about adopting Eri? I know that Izuku would love for her to be a part of our family, and so would I. But I don't think it would be possible for us to adopt her. With the financial situation we're in, I can't afford to stay at home with her. Don't get me wrong, she's a nice girl, but I don't think neither I nor Izuku would be in the position to give her the attention she needs." "Ah, so it's a money issue? I think I can help with that." Krillin pulled out his checkbook and scribbled away. After a minute, he handed the check over to Inko. She nearly fainted after seeing the amount that was written on it. 100 million yen. "There's no way that we could accept something like this. Don't worry about it, my wife is a model so money isn't really an issue for us. I just think it's important that you guys are the ones that take care of her. She's built bonds with both you and your son, and I think separating her from you guys would affect her a lot. I have a 3-year-old daughter at home, which is why this hits home for me. I couldn't imagine my daughter growing without pillars of support, and I don't want my fears for my daughter to become Eri's reality. I understand. Thanks to your generosity, Izuku, and I should be more than capable of handling the privilege of taking care of Eri." Krillin beamed. "Thank you, I know I'm asking a lot, but just know that I truly appreciate this." Krillin then directed his attention towards Eri. She was currently in Izuku's bed, snuggled close to him. Soft snores emitted from the girl as she slept. Beside her Izuku was fast asleep as well, with his good arm wrapped around her. Krillin chuckled. "I was going to ask if she wanted to live with you guys, but I think I already have the answer. I'll go ahead and get the paperwork ready." As the two children slept, Inko smiled at the new addition to the family. Even though things were going to change, it meant that new stories were going to be forged along with new memories of laughter and love, and that was something she would be fine with. Once Krillin arrived at the police station, Detective Tsukauchi asked him to go into his office. Krillin obliged him and followed him into the room. Tsukauchi closed the door to make sure that no one would be able to listen in on their conversation. "So Namasa, what did you need to talk to me about?" Krillin asked. "It's about the information the kid gave me," Namasa responded. "What about it? Is it not good?" "No, it's not anything like that. I used my quirk while he was recalling his story and everything checked out. There's just a question I'm having trouble trying to come up with an answer for." "Well, what is it? What makes the girl so special that even Tao would risk being discovered? Isn't Eri supposedly Tao's niece? Wouldn't that be enough reason?" Krillin questioned. "That's the thing. I checked Tao's file, and there's no evidence that he has siblings. That in itself dispels two notions. The first being that and Tao are related, and the second that the man Tao said was her father really is. Matter of fact, I believe the whole father thing was just a front for the boss. If that's true, do we have any idea who the boss is?" "I may have an idea. I analyzed the patterns of Tao's killings and found that most occurred in the red light district, which is known to have a heavy amount of Yakuza. Also, I found that most victims of Tao were those of various crime syndicates. So you think Tao was just being employed under some Yakuza? Not just any Yakuza. If you can recall, Midoryia said that during his fight with Tao threw a grenade at Eri. Had the kid not been faster, Eri would have died." Krillin didn't understand where the detective was going with this. "Okay, what's your point?" "My point is that Tao mentioned that his boss had the capability of restoring her, even if she suffered that lethal injury. There are only a couple of people I'm aware of with a quirk with a restoration property of that magnitude. Krillin grasped what he meant, and immediately he turned pale. Why, you don't think it's him, right? At first I thought it was, but the person I'm thinking of is just as dangerous. Based on the evidence we have so far, I suspect the boss to be the new up-and-coming Yakuza leader, Kaichisaki Aka Overhaul. Overhaul? From what we know about him so far, he's not someone to be taken lightly. Do you think the Midoriyas are in danger? We should keep an eye on them, but I think they'll be fine. I suspect that Chiskai will try and lay low for a bit after having one of his subordinates get captured. How should we proceed with this information? I'll report this to the HPSC. I think for right now it'll be best to gather more evidence to prove Tao's connection with Chiskai. The last thing we want to do is spook Chiskai and send him into hiding. Right, I'll let you know if I find anything suspicious. Appreciated, Krillin, and thank you for your time. Krillin gave a nod and left the detective's office. Despite Namasa telling him that the Midoriyas were going to be safe, Krillin couldn't help but feel that something bad was bound to happen. Watch your back, kid. After 4 days, Izuku was finally released from the hospital. The doctor made it clear that he needed to take it easy for 2 weeks. Even though school would have started then, Izuku wasn't worried because he doubted that they would do anything intense. Once they arrived home, Eri took a moment to embrace her new surroundings. It wasn't like anything she was used to. The atmosphere of the home gave off a natural warmth and comfort unlike where she had lived previously. Where she had resided before had attempted to do the same thing, but it came off as manufactured. The voice of Inko grabbed her attention. Eri, I'm sorry we don't have a bed for you right now, so it's up to you where you want to sleep. I want to sleep in Izuku's room, Eri said without a second thought. Inko turned to her son. Izuku, would you mind if Eri slept in your room? I would be honored to have the company of the little princess. Eri felt a tinge of red stain her cheeks. She had been called a lot of things, but never before had she been called a princess. She buried her face in her hands to try and hide her embarrassment. Inko giggled at the blushing girl and gently used both her hands to pry Eri's hands off her face. Come on, Eri, let's go ahead and give you a bath. Izuku, could you find some old clothes for Eri to wear? Izuku promptly obeyed and Inko guided Eri to the bathroom. A couple minutes later, Eri sat in the bathtub and let Inko massage her scalp. The shampoo ate away all the dirt and grime she had in her hair. After a bit more scrubbing, Inko dried her off and applied fresh bandages to her arms and legs. Inko yelled for Izuku not long after he came to the bathroom. He came with the old clothes his mom had asked for earlier. After slipping Eri into the pajamas, she was finally ready for bed. Inko knelt down and kissed Eri on the forehead. Good night. The sensation felt strange to the young girl, but she decided that although it was strange she liked it. Inko rose and kissed her son on the forehead as well. She whispered to him, you can't begin to understand just how proud I am of you. You're not going to be a great hero because you already are one. Izuku felt a lump in his throat as he acknowledged the praise he received from his mother. Thanks, Mom. He choked out. Izuku took Eri's hand and led her to his room. As soon as he cut out the lights, Eri released a blood-curdling shrill. Izuku quickly flicked back on the lights and saw that Eri was nearly in tears. I am sorry, it's just that I'm kinda scared of the dark. Izuku placed a hand on top of her head to comfort her. He gently shushed her and said, it's okay, I think I have a nightlight lying around here somewhere. After a couple of minutes of looking around, Izuku found the nightlight, All Might themed of course. He plugged it into the outlet and instantly the smiling face of the symbol of peace appeared on his ceiling. He turned off the lights and asked Eri, is that better? She nodded vehemently before she climbed into bed with him. She snuggled close to him and not long after she was fast asleep, her chest rising ever so slightly. Izuku lay awake as he thought about what had recently happened to him. The sense of guilt still hung over him because of what he had done to Tao. While he was in the hospital, he even had nightmares about it with him being depicted as some bloodthirsty murderer. However, he remembered Krillin's words to try and find the silver lining of the situation. And that silver lining was there in his arms, surrounded by people who cared for her and loved her. Izuku was pretty sure that nothing would be able to absolutely quell the guilt he had. But seeing Eri sleep peacefully showed that it wasn't all bad. After a while, exhaustion started to take over and Izuku drifted off to sleep and for the first time in 5 days, he slept without any nightmares. Izuku, do you have to go? Eri pouted. Izuku ruffled her hair as he gave her a gentle smile. Today, Izuku will be starting his adventure in the UA. While he was excited about the experience, there were others in the household that weren't so much. Sorry Eri, but I can't miss the first day of school. Eri looked to the floor to try and hide her disappointment. Tell you what, when I get back home we'll go out for some sweets. How does that sound? Her disappointment gradually shifted into joy. Her face brightened upon hearing the promise of getting sweets once Izuku got back home from school. Looks like I have my answer. Izuku chuckled. Along with Eri stood Inko, who was fighting back tears. Izuku, you're gonna make me so proud. I know you'll excel. Izuku gave his mom a huge smile before waving her and Eri goodbye. After a fair amount of time he made it to the school. Inside he wandered the halls looking for his classroom. Class 1A, where is it? Izuku knew that being late on his first day wouldn't leave the best impression, so he picked up the pace. Eventually, he found a large door that was labeled 1A. Guess this is it. He felt his heartbeat faster as he grabbed the knob. Relax, it's just a class full of uber talented students. There's nothing to worry about. Who knows? Maybe even your Raka might be in this class. As he opened the door he was greeted by the sight of two familiar faces getting into some type of altercation. In front of him was the blue-haired boy that had called him out during the entrance exam and his former childhood friend, Katsuki Bakugo. It is of utmost importance that you remove your feet from that desk at once. Many students of the past have sat there. The blue-haired teen exclaimed. Katsuki had an annoyed look on his face, and why should I care? The blue-haired teen's glasses gleamed as he gave his response. You should care, because by your actions you are disrespecting the students who came before you. Not to mention, you are also insulting the craftsman who put his blood, sweat, and tears into making that desk. The boy took a deep breath before continuing. Look, I think we got off on the wrong foot. My name is Tenya Iida, and I'm from the Same Private Academy. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Same, huh? Is that where you got the massive tree trunk that's lodged up your A? Katsuki caught himself before he finished his sentence. He had promised himself and his mother that he would change, and he was determined to maintain his resolve. Katsuki growled before responding to Tenya. The name is Katsuki Bakugo, but for you it's just Bakugo, got it? Tenya's eyes widened. Of course. I would never do something so informal such as call you by your first name. We just met, after all. Just making sure we're on the same page. Katsuki muttered. Tenya glanced at the door and saw Izuku standing there. It's that kid who destroyed the zero-pointer. As Tenya approached him, Izuku started to panic. I haven't even been here this long, and something like this is already happening to me. Just my luck, Izuku thought. Hello, my name is Tenya Iida, and I'm from the Same Private Academy. I heard why you earlier. I Izuku Midoryia, pleased to meet you. Midoriya, you are more talented than I took you for. You perceived the nature of that exam, while I did not. I hate to admit it, but you were the superior candidate. Izuku gave a deadpan stare. Roll with it. The sight of Izuku made Katsuki shift uncomfortably in his chair. Great, just when I thought I shook him off, he's here. What the actual hell? You know what, it's fine. If I avoided him all this time, I can avoid him for another 3 years. While he had made a vow to change, he was not ready to confront the boy he had tormented all those years. He honestly didn't have an idea of when he would be. Midoriya, why haven't you answered any of my texts, but more importantly what's with the cast? Izuku turned around and found Ichako with a worried expression on her face. The sight of her in the school uniform made Izuku blush immensely. She's so cute in that uniform. Wait, it's not important right now. She's obviously worried about you. Focus. Izuku regained composure. He knew he couldn't tell her about his fight with Tao, but Namasa never said he couldn't talk about Eri. Recently, I've been preoccupied. My family just adopted a little girl named Eri, so I've been busy trying to get to know her. As far as the broken arm goes, I fell off some monkey bars while I was at the park with her. Ichako seemed satisfied with the answer. She relaxed and asked, oh, so you have a little sister now. When will I get the chance to meet her? Hopefully, soon. She came from a rough environment, so she's kind of shy. But with how kind and caring you are, I think she'll like you. Ichako's face reddened at the compliment. Realizing what he had said to her, he frantically tried to clarify what he had meant with a hint of crimson on his face. Tenya had listened in on the conversation, and there was one thing that Izuku said that was bothering him. I apologize for intruding, however as I was listening into your conversation, there was one thing you said that threw me off. What was it? Izuku asked. You said that you broke your arms falling off some monkey bars, correct? Izuku was bewildered as to where Tenya was going with this. Yeah. And the monkey bars were at the park you attended with your sister, right? At this point, Izuku was utterly confused. That's right. You realize that since parks are designed for small children, most monkey bars within the parks are only 5 feet in height. Looking at you, I would say that you're around 5'4", 5'5". Even if you tucked your knees, I find it hard to believe that you would break your arm from a fall at that height. I find it even harder to believe that you would fall in the first place considering how coordinated you were during the entrance exam. The color from Isaac's face faded as Ichako spoke up. You're right, Iida. Now that I think about it does seem kind of strange. What am I supposed to say now? Monkey bars, really? That's the best I could come up with. Geez, Aniita thought I was perceptive. Izuku racked his brain to try and come up with some sort of explanation, but fortunately he was bailed out from a voice that came from a yellow sleeping bag. If you're here to chit-chat, then I suggest you leave. The class went silent as the man unzipped himself from the bag. It took you all 8 seconds to quiet down. It's known that time is a very precious resource, so I was under the impression that you all would have been a bit more rational on how you used it. Izuku eyed the tired-looking man and tried to discern who he was. Since he's here he has to be some type of pro. But I don't recognize him at all. The name is Shota Izawa. I am pleased to meet all of you. I'll be your homeroom teacher. The scruffy man said in a monotone manner. This homeless-looking guy is going to be our teacher. Izuku thought. But the introduction out of the way, hurry up and put these. Shota saw the cast on Izuku's arm and mentally cursed. From the 30 seconds I've been here, I can already tell that Mr. Number 1 is going to be a problem child. How lucky for me. As his eyes twitched, Shota told the class, actually, forget what I said. Today, we're going to orientation. After I get attendance, follow me down to the auditorium. After Shota gathered attendance, he approached Izuku's desk and told him, after orientation is finished, you need to go down to the nurse's office. For what you're doing tomorrow, you're going to have to be in top shape. Is that understood? Izuku, still startled by the demeanor and appearance of the man, could only muster a nod. After orientation had finished, Izuku went down to the nurse's office just as Shota instructed him to. The nurse was a lady he was already a bit too familiar with. His training sessions with All Might had introduced him to her. From the perspective of most, she seemed to be a sweet old lady, but Izuku knew of the scary side she possessed. He started to recall his first-hand experience of witnessing it. Ow, Izuku said as he rubbed the top of his head. How many times do I have to tell you? You can't keep on injuring yourself like this. Are you trying to die? The old lady fumed after having hit Izuku on top of the head with her cane. And you, she said as she shot a dangerous glare at All Might, who was partially responsible for the state the boy was in. You should know better than to let him recklessly injure himself the way he does. You're his mentor, start acting like it. But, recovery girl, I have to push him. That way he becomes a great successor. Does all that muscle compensate for your lack of common sense? How can he become a great successor if he dies in the process? You have a point. The response only frustrated Recovery Girl further, and not long after All Might was shielding himself as Recovery Girl swung her cane in an attempt to beat the number 1 hero senseless. Izuku shivered as he walked into her office. Recovery Girl asked him what had brought him in a friendly manner, but Izuku didn't miss the threatening undertone as well. It's nothing too bad this time. I just broke my arm while I was playing with my sister. The Recovery Girl eyed him after he gave his reason for being there. He started to sweat as she continued to stare. However, the neutral expression she had eventually shifted into a smile. Okay honey, I'll let you pass this time. But remember what I said. If I keep on getting injured, I'll run out of stamina and die. I'll be more careful. That would be appreciated, the Recovery Girl replied. After receiving a kiss and some candy from the older lady, Izuku eventually made his way out the building. As he started on his way home, a hand firmly clasped his shoulder. He jumped in surprise and turned around to find that it was Iida. Well, it seems that the arm is better. Izuku held his breath as he waited for Tenya to bring up how he broke his arm. Fortunately, for Izuku, that never came up in their conversation. Both students ended up discussing what they thought of orientation and then went on to discuss what they thought their teacher had planned for tomorrow. The sound of Ichako's voice caught both their attention as they walked to the station. Hey guys, wait up. She called out. Tenya waved at her. Well, if it isn't. Ichako, you're Raka. You're Raka, right. Forgive me for failing to remember your name. Tenya said. Ah, it's okay, don't worry about it. Ichako's attention then shifted towards Izuku. So Midoriya, what did you have planned for the rest of the day? She asked. I promised my little sister that I would take her to the bakery after I got back from school. But I was thinking about what you asked me earlier, and I was wondering if Izuku trailed off. If what? Ichako asked with a look of genuine curiosity on her face. If you want to come along with Eri and I. Izuku blurted out. Ichako's mouth fell agape upon hearing Izuku's request. One thing that Ichako had learned about him was that he was someone who thrived on schedules. She learned this after they officially hung out together for the first time. While he had enjoyed the time he spent with her that day, the following times they did hang out and an itinerary was on hand. She didn't mind it, but sometimes she wished that he would be at least a little adventurous. To say that his request was a surprise would have been an understatement, however to Ichako it was a welcomed one. Izuku perceived her silence as her declining his offer and said, it's fine if you aren't available, it was kind of a last-minute thing anyways, and I. Of course I would like to go with you, Ichako said with a bright smile. Izuku's smile stretched ear to ear after hearing her response. He then turned to Tenya and said, if you want to come too, Iida, you're invited. For some reason unknown to Ichako, she felt a bit downtrodden that Izuku had asked Tenya to come along as well. However, she pushed those feelings aside. I apologize Midoriya, but I'm going to have to decline your offer. I had planned to diligently look over the syllabuses Awa-sensei had provided to us once I got home, Tenya stated. Come on Iida, looking over the syllabus won't take that long, and plus it'll give Midoriya and I a chance to get to know you better, Ichako countered. Tenya grabbed his chin as he further pondered Izuku's proposition. He knew it wouldn't take him all day to look over the syllabus, and from what he'd seen so far both Izuku and Ichako had seemed to be nice people. Due to his rigid personality, Tenya didn't have a lot of friends, and truthfully the opportunity of hanging out with friends had intimidated him a bit. With all this in mind, Tenya decided to go against his better judgment and chose to join them. I suppose you have a point. Very well, I will join you too on your endeavors for sweets. Where and when shall we meet? I thought maybe we could meet at my apartment in about 2 hours. That way we all have time to do what we need to, and also gives us time to change. Izuku responded. I think 2 hours from now works, Ichako said. I am in agreement. Also I assume that both of you need my phone number, correct? Tenya asked. As Izuku entered Tenya's phone number into his phone he couldn't have been happier. On the first day of school, he had already made a new friend. It was nice to know that he would be going into the school year with people that he could count on. As he finished entering the remainder of the digits, from the corner of his eye he caught Katsuki walking to the station by himself. The positive mood he was in lessened after seeing him, not because he had spiteful feelings towards the boy. Rather, it was because deep down he wanted Katsuki to be a part of the outing as well. However, it was becoming more and more apparent to Izuku that Katsuki didn't share the same sentiment and probably wouldn't anytime soon. As Izuku stepped through the door the voice of his little sister simultaneously rang out. Izuku, she cried. Izuku bent down as she ran towards him and threw her arms around his neck. He picked her up and spun her around which made her squeal and giggle. After repeating to Izuku that she was getting dizzy he put her down and chuckled as she struggled to retain her balance. It was refreshing for him to see her acting like how a child should be. After regaining her balance, Eri noticed that his arm was no longer in a sling. Hey Izuku, how's your arm all better now? Izuku dropped to one knee to meet Eri's height. The nurse at my school had a quirk that could heal me. That's why my arm is all better. But enough about me, what did you do today, Eri? Well first Ms. Midoriya made me and her eggs and rice for breakfast. Then, we practiced addition and subtraction. After that she showed me pictures of you when you were younger. Izuku's cheeks reddened in embarrassment at the thought of Eri looking at those pictures. Some of them, Izuku really wished his mother would get rid of. Eri continued, and then after we looked at those pictures we watched cartoons the rest of the day. Ah, so it sounds like you had a full day today. Izuku replied. Izuku, are we going to leave for sweets now? Eri asked. Not yet, in about 2 hours we'll leave. Oh okay, well do you want to color with me? Izuku gave her a soft smile. Sure. He replied. As they colored away his phone buzzed and he saw that he had 3 messages, 2 from Ichako and the other from Tenya. Ichako? I can't wait. I know it's gonna be a blast. Tenya? Yes, again Midoriya, I appreciate the invitation. I look forward to consuming food with little nutritional value. Hopefully, this jaunt will be the first of many to come. Ichako? Yeah, what he said. 2 hours later, Izuku heard a knock at his door. I got it, he called out. He opened the door and saw that both Tenya and Ichako had arrived. Tenya was dressed in a full-sleeved, light blue button-down and khakis. He wore dark brown loafers to complete the look. Ichako on the other hand wore a white t-shirt with a forest green jacket over it. She also wore blue jeans and a pair of red and white tennis shoes. Not wearing your hoodie this time, I see, Ichako said as she noted the All Might themed sweatshirt Izuku was wearing. I thought I would mix it up this time, Izuku replied. Wait, he has a hoodie that's labeled hoodie, Tenya questioned. And he has a shirt, a hat, and I've even seen him wear some pants. Okay, I think he gets the point, Izuku interjected. I failed to see the point of adding a description of the apparel upon the apparel. It all seems kind of redundant. As Tenya pondered the mystery that was Izuku's choice in clothing, Inko crept around from the corner to see who the strangers at her door were. Izuku, who would these two be? She asked. Oh, these are my friends I told you about earlier. You're Raka, Iida, meet my mom, Izuku said. Nice to meet you, Ichako said in a bubbly manner. A pleasure to make your acquaintance, Tenya added. The pleasure is all mine. Inko responded. She then directed her gaze towards Ichako with a devious glint in her eye. She seems rather nice. Not to mention, she's also pretty as well. I can see why my son is drawn to her. Well, now that both of them are here together, a little teasing wouldn't hurt. So you're Uraraka. My son seems to talk about you all the time. He always goes on about how amazing you are and how much fun he has spending time with you. Inko said in a casual tone. Both teens' faces went red after hearing what she had said. Mom? Izuku groaned, his face flushed with embarrassment. I'm flattered to hear that. Ochako stammered out. Yeah, but it made me wonder whether you felt the same way about him. Well, Uraraka, do you? Inko asked, feigning genuine curiosity. Normally, she wouldn't have had any difficulty telling Izuku that she thought he was amazing or that she had fun hanging out with him. But being put on the spot like this had made her feel incapable of answering the question. Here will it, she stuttered. As she struggled to come up with an answer, Tenya spoke up. If I may share my opinion regarding Midoriya, I personally think he's amazing in every sense of the word. Not to mention, I have found all of our interactions so far to be rather pleasant as well. Tenya said in the stern fashion he always spoke in. Inko blinked twice in surprise before chuckling. Not long after, her chuckling evolved into full-blown laughter. Eventually, she got a hold of herself, her body occasionally shaking as she attempted to hold back her giggles. Uraraka, if you have feelings for my son you better act quick. It seems that you have some competition. Tenya asked what she had meant, obviously missing the implications of what the green-haired lady was suggesting. Ochako on the other hand, floated in the air, after having activated her quirk as she buried her face in her hands. Okay, I think that's our cue to leave. Eri, are you ready? Izuku yelled. Coming. She yelled back. She wore a red dress, with dark gray leggings, and big tan boots. She ran towards Izuku with a wide smile on her face, however it dissipated once she saw two unfamiliar faces standing in the doorway. She hid herself behind Izuku's leg so that she would be out of their line of sight. Uraraka, Iida, this is my little sister Eri. Come on Eri, say hi. Izuku said in a gentle tone. Eri refused to budge, her nervousness proving to be too much for her. I'm sorry guys, like I said before, Eri can be kind of shy. Izuku said as he scratched the back of his head. Don't sweat it, Midoriya. Ochako replied. She squatted down to meet Eri's eyes, and as she did so Eri tried her best to further hide behind her big brother's leg. Hello Eri, my name is Ochako, it's nice to meet you. Also I think your dress is really cute. She said to the little girl with a warm smile on her face. Eri peeked her head from behind Izuku's leg and mumbled a quiet thank you before hiding herself again. Tenya however was not as tactful with his introduction as Ochako was. He approached the little girl and towered over her. He extended his hand forwards and said, my name is Tenya Iida. I'm pleased to make your acquaintance. Eri gripped the back of Izuku's pants harder due to Tenya's stoic nature. Ochako sweat dropped at Tenya's attempt to introduce himself. She leaned over towards his ear and told him, you realize that you are speaking with a child, right? I'm aware, however it's never too early to know how to properly introduce yourself. When I was her age I learned how to introduce myself in a formal manner. Tenya replied. I'm pretty sure your upbringing was different than most. Ochako countered. Well, is everyone ready to leave? Izuku asked. The longer he stayed the more it allowed for his mother to tease him, so the sooner they left the better. I am, Ochako said. I am as well, Tenya added. Alright, we'll be on our way mom. We shouldn't be too long. Okay, be sure not to overdo it with the sweets. I don't want you and Eri's appetite to be spoiled, and also please be careful. Izuku looked into his mother's eyes and knew exactly why she said that. His last outing resulted in him being sent to the hospital. The fact that his mother had even agreed to let him take Eri out in the first place had been a miracle. Wanting to put his mother's mind at ease he told her, I promise to be careful. He shot her a smile and a thumbs up, and with that the squad of four left. As the teens made their way to the bakery, Izuku and Ochako had learned quite a bit about Tenya, and vice versa. The duo had learned that Tenya was a part of the Ingenium family and that his older brother was the turbo hero, Ingenium. From the way that Tenya talked about his brother, it was obvious to both that he held him in high esteem and idolized him. They had also learned that his motivation for becoming a hero was because of his brother. While the teens conversed amongst themselves, Eri remained silent as she held Izuku's hand. She really didn't understand why those two had to come. The trip to the bakery was supposed to be just for her. The two that were accompanying them just made her nervous. Ochako noticed Eri's discomfort and tried to think of a way to break the ice. She eyed the ground and noticed that there were a bunch of fallen cherry blossom petals. She looked around and saw that there were no other people besides her friends. She turned her head towards Eri and asked, Hey Eri, do you want to see something cool? Eri didn't say anything, but the glance she sent to Ochako told the brunette that she was interested in what she was about to show her. Scooping up a bunch of petals, Ochako pressed her hands together and activated her quirk. The light pink petals seemed to dance as they ascended higher into the sky. Iri's eyes widened as she marveled at the display. The sight also captured the attention of Izuku and Tanaya, one of which was smiling and the other frowning. After Ichako deemed that the petals were high enough, she pressed her fingertips together to return the gravity to the petals. Iri watched as the petals fell, the air resistance making it seem like they were performing some kind of routine. Izuku also was captivated by the show, however Tenya wasn't as thrilled. Tenya took a deep breath through his nose and readjusted his glasses before exclaiming, "Uraraka, you must know that it's improper to use your quirk in such a setting. As individuals striving to become heroes, it's important that we follow the rules that are set in place." Despite Tenya's words, Ichako's demeanor remained unchanged. "Iida, don't be such a stick in the mud. Look." She nodded her head over to Iri, who was watching the petals fall in awe. "Wow Izuku, did you see that? That was incredible," the little girl gushed, a large smile now adorning her face. "Yeah it was, wasn't it?" Izuku responded. Tenya did the best he could to fight off the grin that had graced his face, but to his chagrin, he was unable to keep his lips from curling upwards. He did not condone Ichako using her quirk in that way, however seeing the smiling little girl before him made him not mind as much. While he wasn't the most knowledgeable when it came to social interactions, he knew that Iri was hesitant to open up around them. So despite the actions of Ichako being illegal, he decided not to blow the situation out of proportion. The teens continued to talk on the way to the bakery, however they now had the addition of Iri in their conversation as well. Eventually, they arrived at the bakery, and once they were inside they marveled at the huge selection. "Whoa, just look at all the different types of mochi they have here," Ichako exclaimed. The chichi dango looks good. I suppose I'll get 3 skewers," Tenya stated. "Personally, I'm thinking about getting a chocolate steamed cake. What about you Iri, anything capturing your eye?" Izuku asked. Iri looked around to try and found what she wanted. She scanned each panel of glass until her eyes landed on one sweet in particular. Izuku noticed where her gaze lingered, and when she told him what she wanted he was not surprised. After everyone had paid, they went outside to find a place to eat. Iri opened her box which contained narakiri that were shaped like cherry blossoms. From the corner of her eye Ichako had seen what Iri had chosen, and as a result she smiled softly to herself as she munched away. Once everyone had finished eating, they eventually made their way back to Midoriya's apartment. On the way there, Ichako's stomach rumbled loudly. "Ugh, I think I might have overdone it a bit," she groaned. "Maybe if you heeded my suggestion, you would not be experiencing gastric discomfort." Eating all that mochi was only bound to end in disaster, Tenya rebutted as he chopped his arm in an unusual fashion. Lagging behind, Iri giggled at the peculiar motion, however she promptly stopped once Tenya noticed her doing so. She started to shrink back in fear as the glasses-wearing teen approached her. Izuku figured that Tenya would try and scold her, but instead he did something completely unexpected. He picked her up and sat her square on his shoulders. "Iida, what are you doing?" Izuku asked. "She seemed tired so I put her on my shoulders. Tense I would do this for me all the time when I was younger," Tenya replied. Thanks for watching this video. Part 3 is over. If you really enjoy this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the playlist that I have created and enjoy. Link is in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.